Folks, in this video, I'm going to go over some benefits and use cases of Git. In the first scenario, we're going to have developer A working by him or herself on their own machine. And if you've ever wanted to, prior to Git, if you ever want to save off a version, a working version, or a version with a specific feature, you might create a folder with a date timestamp and a label saying version 1 with feature X, and then maybe later on you save it off again with different date time labeled as version 2, and maybe feature Y. So with Git, it can kind of do that pretty well, very automatically, and then Git will also allow you to roll back to a working version, figure out what changed, what broke, what changed. If something's broken, it'll figure out what changed and in the source code, so you can figure out what broke the code. And if you ever need to roll back to a version with specific features, Git can do that as well. So that's the first scenario we're going to go over on how to use Git and how it can help you when you work with code. The second scenario is if you've ever had to back up your code or share your code. Without Git, you might save the code off to a backup drive, or maybe email it to yourself and then kind of store it in email. I've done that before I learned about Git, and with Git, that's no longer an issue. So how Git would do it is you can push it into a remote repository such as GitHub. It doesn't have to be GitHub. Any kind of remote repository will work. GitLab is a great alternative to GitHub. And the only reason we're using GitHub in this class is just the timing. At the time this class was made, GitHub was maybe slightly more popular than GitLab, but at this point in time, some might argue that GitLab has better features than GitHub. But so we're just going to stick with GitHub because everything is kind of set up. And if you ever want to go to GitLab, it's pretty seamless. So that's the second scenario, backing up and sharing code, and that's where Git can help. Because again, if you're paranoid like me and worried about your computer breaking, then yeah, sharing and backing up your code routinely is a good idea. So on to the last scenario is when you're working with a team. So we are going to call that developer B. And developer B is going to work with developer A via GitHub to collaborate on code. And in this scenario, there's only two developers, but whether it's 2, 3, 4, or however many, the workflow is the same. So we're just going to go through this scenario, and then you can extrapolate that to how it might work for a team of more than 2 people. So again, before Git, I might have had to email the code as an attachment to a team member, and then one of us might have the tedious and horrible duty of figuring out what changed between 2 versions of the code, and then manually kind of reconcile and merge the changes, so then we have a version of the code with what we want moving forward. And it might not be email, it could be something like a shared drive or a Dropbox app. So that is the last scenario of Git that we'll go over. And hopefully at the end, going through those scenarios, you understand how to use Git and how it can benefit you in your as you work with code. And hopefully you'll love it as much as I do. I think it's a great tool when working with code. I use it every day, and hopefully it can help you whenever you work with code as well. But Git doesn't need to be just for code. you can just work with any files with plain text. Okay, so thank you for watching.